Good evening and welcome to the Marion City Council meeting. Today is Thursday, April 5th. It's 5:30 and we'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beth, would you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Draper.
Here.
Ms. Etzel. Present. Mr. Jensen.
Present.
Mayor Abou-Osley. Ms. Gedalia.
Here.
Mr. Brandt.
Here.
Mr. Sternad.
Here.
Okay, at this
Thank you.
time, thanks, Beth. At this time, we'll have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. This evening we were going to have swearing in of a few firefighters and paramedics, but there's actually an active scene. Everyone is okay, but the entire department is on that call, so we will have to defer this until hopefully the next public meeting. So if anyone came for that, we just wanted to let you know up front so you weren't sitting through the meeting waiting. Okay, and with that, we will move on to the consent calendar.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented. Items 1 through 13, items 15 through 17, and then 19 through 22. And that includes resolutions 26761 through 26774 and 26776 through 26778 and resolution 26780.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Will, a second by Kim for the consent calendar, completely removing item 14 and I believe pulling 18 out for a separate discussion. And again, those cover resolutions number 26761 through 26774 and 26776. through 26778 and 26780. Any discussion on the ones that are left in?
Just to clarify, we're taking number 14 out?
Completely, yeah.
Okay.
I did want to say something about item number 7, the 2018 Parks and Forestry Work Program. I meant to just congratulate Mike on Tuesday. It's super thorough. Obviously, you guys have a lot of stuff going on this year, a lot of good projects, and it just goes to show all of the great property and beautification going on in the city to maintain it and keep it going. So thanks for that report. Anyone else? All those in favor of the consent calendar as presented signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so
I'll read 18 then.
great, thank you, Will.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 26779 of support for the Wayland Mayor's Challenge for Water Conservation.
Second?
Okay, motion by Will, second by Steve for resolution 26779. Any discussion? Okay, I asked to have it pulled. I just didn't want to monopolize it. I guess I will. So Todd Steigerwalt couldn't be here this evening, but I just wanted to explain what this was. It was on Tuesday, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it. And we'd really just like to encourage everyone to take a moment and go onto the city website. I'm not sure if it's there yet, but there will be a link for this Wyland Mayor Challenge for Water Conservation. It's for the entire month of April, and it's basically a personal pledge. I took it today. It took me maybe 2 minutes, if that, to get through. And it's basically actions that you would take taking a shorter shower, or not hosing down using a broom instead of a hose when you're doing outside chores, and just some things to make you recognize how we can all conserve water. What's neat about it is that you don't have to give your address, but you do pick your city, and the more people from the city that pledge to do these things, the city can earn awards, monetary incentives. So it would be great for everyone to go on for the conservation of water, and then as a secondary benefit for the city. It also gives you an interesting fact by telling you, based on the actions that you said you will take, how much water you are likely to save just as an individual over the course of the year. So again, I would encourage everyone to go on, and I appreciate Mr. Steigerwalt putting that forward for us. Apparently this is something that we do every year and have been for a while. I haven't been a part of it, but I'm glad to be now.
I'll give you one more comment or suggestion in this arena. I just had an individual at my house fixing my water softener, and most people in Marion have water softeners, right, by kind of out of necessity. But one of the suggestions he gave me to help prolong its life and consume or minimize the amount of salt and all that is if you go on vacation. He said, what do you do when you go on vacation with your water softener or anything in the house? I go, we just leave. And he said, unplug it. So it's just as simple as a little idea like that to help prolong your water softener. And sometimes the water softener goes bad, and it'll use up a lot of water in a week's time if all of a sudden the timer goes bad or something like that. So pretty easy suggestion he gave me. He said, just unplug it. You don't have to do anything else. And when you come back home, plug it in. So, I'll pass that on.
We should add that to the survey. That one wasn't in there.
I just checked, and the link is live on the website. It's on the landing page.
Thank you. Okay. So we're voting on 18
Yep.
then? Okay. All those in favor of resolution number 26779, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Finance.
Your Honor, I make a motion to approve resolution number 26781, authorizing and approving a loan agreement providing for the sale of and issuance of general obligation corporate purpose bonds, series 2018A, and providing for the levy of taxes to pay the same.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Randy and a second by Paul. Is there a presentation?
Yes, Your Honor. Tiana Pooler, our financial consultant, is here to tell you the bids that we had today and answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tiana Pooler with Independent Public Advisors. Thank you for having me. You have in front of you just a little sheet that shows the bids that you received today. There were 6. The low bid was represented by FTN Financial Capital Markets out of Memphis. Actually, of the 6 bids you received, 3 of them came from Tennessee. But you had a nice amount of interest in your bonds. The Robert W. Baird list at the very bottom usually bids with quite a number of banks, and so there was significant interest in the bonds. They are rated AA1, which is the rating that you've carried for a while. Maybe not the last time I was here, but maybe the time before that. I gave you some statistics about that. I'll just remind you that there are only 6 AA1 communities in the state. Ames, Ankeny, Cedar Falls, Cedar Rapids, and Urbandale besides you. There's only 1 rating category that's higher than that. That would be AAA, and there are only 3. So it's a very attractive rating that's evidenced by the fact that you always get quite a bit of interest in your bonds. Today's bonds, the TIC was 2.64%. We actually estimated about a 2.86 when we did this, and so you're receiving a lower interest rate than what we had anticipated. A lot of that's actually going to be represented in additional proceeds. You have about $105,000 extra that you can spend on projects than what we originally anticipated when we borrowed. And I know that there was an amount put into the budget for FY19. Just wanted to reassure you that the payment that will be made is about $20,000 less than what was in the budget. So we made sure that that was taken care of as well. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. But otherwise, I would recommend that you award the bonds to FTN Financial.
Thanks, Tiana. Anyone have any questions?
Just a comment about the change in the difference of 0.2% between what the estimate was and what the low bid was. I mean, 0.2% in this arena is quite a bit.
Rates have been moving a lot.
I thought they were
lately.
moving upwards, though.
They were moving up, but in the last little bit, it's been a little bit down. But I also, when I'm going through the estimation process, I want to make sure, especially as we're trying to set rates for budget, I want to make sure that we're pretty conservative. So it's a combination of having a conservative initial estimate and the movement in rates. I will say that rates have gone up about 30 basis points than your last bond issue over a similar time period.
Okay.
This is actually a longer issue, so the rate seems quite a bit higher, but for similar years, it's about 30 basis points higher than it was when we did the 2017B issue. So rates are on their way up, but they're still attractive.
I agree. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Randy and a second by Paul for Resolution 26781, authorizing and approving a loan agreement. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, Your Honor, with that, if I could get you to sign a couple documents really quick.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wes. Okay, we're going to move on to hearing on the notice of alcohol violation by Best Western plus Long Branch, Douglas DeLong, 90 Twickstown Road Northeast. This is new on me, and I think a lot of us here. So I guess for this procedure, what we're going to do is Mr. DeLong here? Okay, I would ask that you come forward, state your name and address for the record, and present what you'd like to present, since this was at your request.
Douglas DeLong, 2000 Hickory Nut Lane, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I guess my business has been charged with an alcohol violation. I haven't seen any evidence. However, I would like to say that I have 86 employees, and their livelihood depends on my business having a liquor license. So I take that IDing customers very seriously. All of our employees are trained in alcohol training and tips training. And we meet every month with a meeting and go over these kinds of things. We don't even allow minors in the bar. In fact, people have called me and threatened me with age discrimination suits because we don't allow minors in the bar, saying that it's their right to come into the lounge. I haven't seen the evidence, but I did receive a notice that one of my employees served 2 people in a sting, I guess, but I haven't. No evidence was presented to me, so I don't know for sure, but I believe what they're talking about. So I interviewed the employee. She took the IDs of the people who came in, looked them over carefully, and when she did serve them, she just made a good faith error. I believe the law says reasonable care to attain whether the person is under the legal age. And this employee had been through TIPS training and did her very best to take their ID and look it over and made a good faith error.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
DeLong. Ryan, if you'd come up and present the city's evidence for this, or the citation, explanation, that'd be great. And Mr. DeLong, before you leave this evening, if you could fill out one of these yellow
You did.
cards. Oh, you already did. Thank you.
We already have one, Your Honor.
Okay.
So, thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. Before I actually begin even with the presentation of the evidence and just what had happened, I'd just like to indicate, and I believe that Chief McHale has also stated this at the work session on Tuesday night, that that Long Branch is not an establishment that we consider to, the city considers to be a problematic establishment, that they are generally, well, this seems to be certainly an aberration for them, that this is not a standard practice. So we want to assure Mr. DeLong that this is not in any event an attempt by the city to single him out or single his establishment out, or that there's any concern that the establishment in general is being run poorly. And in fact, there was a news piece that was done on this, and there were actually 7 establishments that day that were in the Marion area.
We went to 20 and 7 failed.
So there were multiple establishments that this happened to that failed the age test on that day. So it's certainly not in any attempt to single out Long Branch. What did happen, this was on December 19, 2017. The city, the Marion Police, I don't know whether you can read that because it's a pretty small type, but the Marion Police utilized maybe I'll just read a little better, but I'll have the chief give the factual recitation, and then I'll get to the legal
So the
side.
compliance check was conducted. 2 individuals entered the bar, sat at the bar. They were both 20 years of age, I believe. They presented their IDs, and just exactly as Mr. DeLong stated, she did look at the IDs. However, she must have miscalculated or not looked at them correctly to ascertain that the individuals were under 21. She was issued a citation. She was subsequently given a court date. On February 28th of 2018, she did plea to service to underage. And then the next business day, a notification was sent to Long Branch that a violation had occurred on the license thereafter.
So I zoomed in a little bit. Hopefully you can see it. The server that was reported when the law enforcement officers went into Long Branch was an Alicia Ann Cornelius. This happened at approximately 7:23 p.m. on December 19. Following that occurrence, Ms. Cornelius was charged in the Lynn County District Court. It's a little hard to see with the shaded area, but that is the case number from the Lynn County District Court. You can see Alicia Ann Cornelius. The offense date was on December 19, 2017. This is the section of the Iowa Code that she was charged under, 123.49 subparagraph 2 subparagraph H, which relates to not only the penalties that happen for an employee that does that, but then what follows under 123.50 when in this case, scroll up a little bit here, she entered a guilty plea and was found guilty and convicted. Once that happens under 123.50 is that then there is also a follow-up that action that can be taken against whomever is the holder of the liquor license. In this case, it was Long Branch. So I realize that Mr. DeLong is saying that he didn't really receive evidence of what had happened here, but he is, in effect, he has been given what is necessary to establish the city's claim under the Iowa Code. Really, the battleground as to whether or not this incident occurred was on the part of Alicia Cornelius when she went to court, whether she was going to contest the charge or not. She decided not to fight it. She entered a guilty plea. She was convicted. At that point, it's essentially strict liability then against the bar owner, whomever is the holder of the liquor license. So in that case, once that was entered, the sentencing date for that was February 28 of this year. A couple of days later, Long Branch was issued the notice of alcohol violation, here signed by the chief, indicates that it was hand-delivered to Best Western at that address. Along with the notice of the alcohol violation, Long Branch would have been given the notice of violation, assessment of penalty, and right to a hearing. That's also dated March 2nd. If you see in the right-hand corner there, it cites the relevant provisions of the Iowa Code and indicates that he can either opt to pay a $500 penalty or essentially by de facto, whether he chooses not, he would face a 14-day liquor license suspension. which is why if you see the next item on the agenda, it's a suspension, but we'll get to that in a moment. The critical point in this is that he was also given a form to sign if he wanted, which was a waiver of the hearing and the consent to the penalty, which he could have signed had he so chose. He did not. And these forms do advise him that if he does not wish to, or if he wishes to contest it, that he has 10 days in which to make application for an appeal and for a hearing. This is the blank written request form that the chief would have served with these other papers. And you can see that Mr. DeLong actually did fill it out and returned it on March 12th, so he did it in a timely fashion. He was given notice then of the time and place of hearing by the city clerk's office, that it would be here at this time. So essentially, if Mr. DeLong is sort of making a seminal argument that he's been deprived of due process rights, he has not. He was given notice, and he's been given an opportunity to be heard, which is what is required of due process. He has had his say, and it's not as though he is somehow being accused of wrongdoing. It's strict liability, as I said. Once his employee was found guilty in court of serving the alcohol to the minor, now he, as the owner of that liquor license, is now liable for a civil penalty, which can either be in the form of $500 or the 14-day liquor license suspension. Now, since he did timely make the application for a hearing for an appeal, I realize on the agenda it indicates the resolution is for a suspension. I would certainly say from a legal standpoint, if the council upholds the violation, he could certainly be given the option of paying the penalty rather than facing the suspension. But we'll get to that if and when the council upholds the violation. So I don't believe I have anything additional to add unless the chief does. Okay.
Okay, thank you both.
I have
Sure. Paul?
a couple
Ryan?
of questions, John.
Sure.
What is our authority? Can we, I mean, you're talking about a state statute. Can we overrule that?
Yeah, that was can we overrule that? Well, I mean, you have the discretion as the you're essentially sitting here as a tribunal. You're not going to overturn the state statute, but what you do have is the discretion to excuse the civil penalty. You could, as a governing body, vote not to uphold the city's civil infraction.
Well, okay. And my other question is, what about the other 6? If we gave 7 tickets, were they license removed for 30 days or whatever the law is?
It would be on a case-by-case, Councilman, depending on if it was their first, second, third, or fourth, or subsequent violations. So if it was their first penalty, they would have been given the same option, $500 fine or a 14-day suspension, and the option of a hearing before that. So it's definitely a case. Every business is going to be different with their level of violations, depending on their history. In this case, Long Branch had no prior violations. It was their first violation. So the first course of action is a $500 fine or a 14-day suspension.
So
Thank you.
would it be correct, Chief, that the manner in how it was done at the Long Branch was the same manner in how it was done at the other 19 places that were visited on that day?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. It was actually the same individuals that went into.
Same individuals,
yep.
same circumstances?
Same process.
Okay, very good.
I had a question as well. I just want to clarify. They weren't fake IDs. The server just misread the year, miscalculated the age.
It was their actual
real
Iowa driver's licenses. Yeah.
In fact, the Iowa Code actually makes reference to that in 123, that it is a defense if the person used a fake ID.
That's why I asked. Yeah. Thank you.
And that would have been brought up at Ms. Cornelius's hearing.
Right. Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, so at this time, let's see. So do we vote on this? This is a hearing, just from a
I think it's the
procedural
next
standpoint.
item, here.
No, this is the hearing.
Okay. so
Excuse me, Your
number
Honor,
three.
if I may.
Public
Yes.
hearing.
One of the things we discussed prior to the record this evening when we talked about the procedure that we'd follow for this, since this is we're all kind of on new territory here, was that if Mr. DeLong had any rebuttal to what I had just said, that you would offer him the opportunity to come forward and speak one last time.
That makes sense. Do you want to come back up, Mr. DeLong?
I have no problem with the procedure or whatever he was talking about with being notified. The first notification I got was March 2nd, the only notification I got. I have no problem with any of that. The server just made a good faith error, reasonable. I think she did reasonable care. She took the ID, she read the ID, she just made a mistake. And it's not about $500, it's about if another mistake is made or if a loss of liquor license, these people in my business depend on a liquor license. So it's very important, and that's why we don't allow minors in the bar, and we ID everyone, and she just made a mistake. And I'm just looking at the law, and it said reasonable care. So this notice came to me, and it was signed and say you're guilty, and I had not seen any of the evidence. All I had was the employees telling me something happened, and all of our employees who serve liquor sign a paper when they start. If they are charged or caught not IDing correctly, they're terminated. This person no longer works for me the very next week. When I got the information from employees, she was terminated, unfortunately, because she was actually a long-term employee. But what I'm questioning is, would be your discretion, is that counts reasonable, what the law reads, reasonable care to obtain that the person was of legal drinking age. The gal looked at it and just made a good faith error. So that's what we're asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Mr. DeLong, could you return, please? I have a question. I would just like some clarification. Did you correctly state that you ID people as they're entering in your bar, as you mentioned that no one so they missed this twice? Is that correct?
Actually, they passed. They didn't stop at the door. There wasn't anyone there. They were off-seating customers or whatever, and they went right to the bar. When people come into our bar, we ID them going into the bar, but not the restaurant, which is a different direction because we allow people in there. But they didn't stop at the front. They went right in. I wasn't there personally, but I assume they just went right into the bar, and that individual then checked their IDs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, did you want to add anything or say anything else,
Or do
Ryan?
we have discussion now?
If I may, would you like me to return to the podium?
Yes, please,
Yeah,
actually,
okay.
if you would.
What I would just say briefly in rebuttal is that clearly she did not exercise reasonable care. The violation that she was charged with and was found guilty of was precisely outlined to address exactly what happened. The code says she is to check to determine that she is not serving alcohol to a minor. She served alcohol to minors. She was given not fake IDs, she was given actual IDs. She later admitted, I guess I added wrong. While that may be a good faith mistake, that is not upholding reasonable care as set forth in the code. Those are two totally different things. So I would dispute Mr. DeLong's comment that his server acted with reasonable care. This is exactly why that statute is written, and that's exactly why the penalties are set forth, and therefore not doing what she was supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll close the hearing for out there and just bring it to discussion. If anyone has any more questions or wants to make any comments before
I have
we
the
vote.
resolution, and then we can discuss it
Okay.
in there.
Great.
Resolution number 26-782 regarding suspension of liquor license of Best Western plus Long Branch, Douglas DeLong, and it's located at 90 Twickstown Road Northeast.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Paul and a second by Kim. Discussion, comments?
First comment I would make clearly is that the reason you have not been cited before is because you have done a good job in the past of training your employees, and I think you should absolutely continue to do that. That is essential so that you are not cited again. So your training is good. You got a lot of employees that you need to train. Continue doing that in the manner you have been doing, but I see this as just a situation no different than any of the other places that, again, unfortunately a mistake was made. The person pled guilty, so I really don't see any reason to change the situation.
Paul?
If I understand this right, we're not talking about the fine, that's a done deal. We're talking about the suspension of the license. That's basically what this motion is?
Just to clarify, are you talking about the fine that was issued to Ms. Cornelius or the $500 civil penalty to Long Branch?
Well, has Long Branch paid the $500 fine? I mean, that's why he's in here.
No, they have not.
Yeah. So we need to determine whether he still needs to pay the fine as it has been issued and cited, or we decide to accept his presentation and drop the fine.
Correct.
Right.
And that's why I would say that even though the resolution that is before the council is to suspend, since Long Branch did timely file its appeal, and today is the date of the hearing, if you determine that the penalty should be upheld, then the 14 days in which he has to pay the $500 penalty would start running from today, not from the date that he was issued the notice. But you would need to amend the resolution if you were going to do that.
If in my mind, though, if I thought the $500 fine was enough of a penalty, and if he paid that, where would I be on this motion?
If he pays, if we amend it, if we amend the resolution, okay, if you find that he is in violation and you're going to uphold the penalty, however form that takes, and then you amend the resolution for the 14 days to begin running, he would have the option of paying that $500 within that 14 days. If he pays the $500, there's no suspension. He does not end up with a suspension of the license. If he could either opt to take the 14 days, or if the 14 days runs and he doesn't pay the fine, then he gets a suspension.
And he has the option of doing that before the suspension goes into...
That's how I read the code, yes.
Okay.
So if we approve this resolution, then he has the 14 days to pay the $500 or his license is suspended.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what I...
Okay. Very sure as much. Got it.
Will we be doing a roll call vote for this, Beth, or does this need a roll call?
Does not need one, but you can do one, yes.
I think we might need to, so
Okay.
just to be safe. Okay, any other questions or discussions before we?
It would seem to me that if that being the case, we're putting the Long Branch in the same position we put 6 other units in.
Right.
And if they paid their fines, they're not suspended. And if he pays his fine, they're not suspended.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
I think we've had all of the other 6 come through already that they paid their fine, I
Well,
thought.
they would have had to, or
Yeah.
they would have had to come in here.
Yeah, the other 6 have come through and waived their right to a hearing and
Right.
paid the fine.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready for that roll call vote, please, Beth.
Mr. Draper,
Yes.
Ms. Etzel,
Yes.
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Ms. Gedalia,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt,
Yes.
Mr. Nan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, resolution 26-782 passes. Okay, nothing from public services, police, fire. We're on to parks.
Excuse me.
Oh, yeah.
Your Honor, just to be clear, is that 26,782 passed as amended?
For this suspension or 500?
Yes.
That was my understanding. I don't know.
That was my intent.
That was the understanding and how we understood your explanation.
Yes.
Right. I just
Do we need to
didn't hear an
clarify that?
well, I just didn't hear an actual motion to amend it.
Do we need to revisit it?
Yep, would you
That
like
would
us-
probably be a good idea.
Okay.
Just so you have a record that you are moving to amend the resolution, because what you just passed or would have just passed
All right,
was
I'll do
as drafted.
Suspension only, okay.
All right, so I'll move to amend resolution number 26782 regarding suspension or a $500 fine for the Best Western plus Long Branch, Douglas DeLong at 90 Twixt-Town Road Northeast.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so a motion by Steve and a second by Paul for an amendment to 26,782, offering Mr. DeLong the choice.
Okay.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, abstentions? No. Okay. I think that's clearer. Since everyone had voted yes, I just assumed we didn't need a roll call for
Very
that.
good.
So after you make amendment, then you would need
Yeah.
to vote on the resolution as amended then.
I would move that we, under 26,782, regarding the suspension of the liquor license, Best Western plus Long Branch, Douglas DeLong, 90 Twixt-Town Road Northeast, be approved as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion by Paul, second by Will.
Got it.
Any final discussion? I think the third time's the charm.
Yeah. No, well, we did amend it. Counsel? Yes.
Okay, now a vote. Okay, we'll just again do a full vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Sorry for the confusion. Moving on to parks, please.
Your Honor, I make a motion to approve ordinance number 18-3, amending Chapter 115 of the Code of Ordinances relating to the cemetery. Initial consideration.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Kim and a second by Will for ordinance 1803. Mike, would you give us a little synopsis on this?
Yes, Your Honor. We are updating our cemetery codes to align with the state code related to the Iowa Cemetery Act. Within that code, we are changing the definition of a deed to interment rights. We're defining a grave space versus what a lot is in the cemetery. We are also updating and defining perpetual care to align with state code, and then updating our current cemetery rules and regulations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mike? We went through this pretty good on Tuesday.
Mhm.
Okay, so we have the motion. We have it seconded. All those in favor of ordinance number 1803 to amend Chapter 115 of the Code of Ordinances related to the cemetery, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Moving on to engineering. We're going to start with a public hearing regarding an electric line easement with ITC Midwest LLC for certain city property located north of Highway 100 and east of 44th Street. I'm going to open this to the public and ask Mike for some background, please.
So basically, ITC is going to come through. This is their approximate starting point. If you can see the little laser pointer on the PowerPoint presentation, they're putting a new line in, going up 151, back 100, going up Munier Road. They're proposed putting a substation here. That location may change in the future, but right now that's their proposed location. Coming back down 100 and then coming to our existing substation that would be northwest of Menards back there. In that process, then there's some existing lines that are going through Squaw Creek that they will then abandon and take down. So what they're asking for is an overhang easement. They will actually install the poles in the DOT right away, but the guy wires, because they're on a T-post, will overhang onto city property. The easement that they're requesting is this one right here. It's 25 feet along Highway 100, east of 44th, north of Highway 100. They used a land value of $8,748 per acre. There's 0.29 acres that they are putting this encroachment on. And as we do for our value, they're paying us 50% of the land value, which is $1,268.46 for the easement. We still retain the property. It's just obviously there would be some height restrictions because you can't be exactly next to a power line.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone from the public like to come up and speak in favor of the easement? Does anyone have any questions regarding it or want to speak against it? Now's your opportunity. Okay, seeing none.
I make a resolution to approve, make a motion to approve resolution number 26783, approving electric line easement with ITC Midwest LLC for certain city property located north of Highway 100 and east of 44th Street.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Steve and a second by Paul for resolution 26783. Any discussions up here? Mike, when's this going to happen?
So they have to go through the Iowa Utility Board, so it's not going to happen overnight. They still haven't figured out the location for that transformer station that we discussed, and there'll be some discussions as to what that looks like and stuff. So, but in order for them to go through their process, they have to say we have an approved alignment. So there's lots of hoops they have to jump through. This is just one of them.
So they haven't started, oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
They haven't started
They
putting
haven't started
any of those
building or
lines
anything yet.
anywhere?
No.
No, okay.
And this is just upgrading the volts and amps that are available to help serve the area.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of resolution number 26783 for the easement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, moving on to planning and development.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 26784, approving the final plat of memorandum of agreement, final plat and memorandum of agreement for Uptown Dental First Edition at 897th Ave, 758 9th Street, and the east half of the east-west alley between them. J Lenz LLC.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Will and a second by Randy. Is there anything, Tom, for this?
Just for sake of discussion, this is the final plat of the lot for Uptown Dental is being built currently. The council will recall we vacated an alley in that vicinity that kind of held up the final plat for a period of time. That's why the building's up, and we're just now getting to the final plat. But this just establishes the lot of record.
Okay. So it's basically a formality at this point. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for resolution 26784 for final plat and MOA for Uptown Dental. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, moving on to administrative. So there's an update regarding the tenants at the Marion Square Plaza. Lon?
Yeah, this is an item that council wanted to receive an update on. There's been some news coverage on it recently that I think that raised some questions amongst the city council. So I asked representatives from both Ryan Companies and from Genesis Equities to come in and give an update to the council on where the project is at. And I think Hannah is going to be speaking on their behalf tonight. Or are you going to start with Jeff?
Jeff Witter, Genesis Equities. I can do Square for address. I'm going to wear two hats because I have a different role in this project than I did 6 months ago. So we are also the landlords. So as a landlord, and that's really the issue, I believe. I never watched the news cycle because I just don't ever watch it. So to go back in time, it was a while back that Ryan and Company was able to work a deal with the then owner and get some time to work on this project, to put it together. And then time went past, didn't all get done. No fault of anyone's. Projects like this take a long time. Just for instance, when I do a residential and there's only us making decisions, we expect it to take 2 years on something easy. So the fact that this is in its third year for a project this difficult with this many pieces, with this many people giving input, is pretty normal. But nevertheless, NADA was only going to give us a certain amount of time. And then we got like a 6-month extension, which we had to pay substantially, give him money to get an extension. Meanwhile, keep in mind, the tenants are really being harmed during this process. And it ain't just this one, but any time that there's decisions and talking about projects in public, it harms the tenants. So as a landlord, if it harms the tenants, it also harms the landlord. Because without the tenants, the value of the property goes way down. Somebody has to pay the value, and we didn't get it for cheap. NADA wasn't stupid about it. We paid good money for it. So he wasn't extending it anymore. So the whole thing was on the cusp of falling apart. So we had a lot of money tied up into it and a lot of time. We were a small role there, and we were always, Ryan Companies was invited us to be the residential partner, so that's all we were. So we're really a purchaser mostly. But somebody needed to buy it or everything died off. So we stuck our neck out for Marion because we're invested in this town, and this is a big project for this city. So we purchased it. So we have the tenants that have leases, and I don't blame them for being upset because it's just a drip, drip, drip of uncertainty that they have to try to run their business. And every time whether they initiated the news cycle or someone else did, anytime anybody talked about that project, it was always about the library and the excitement, and the tenants get lost. So if anybody really wants to support that, they need to support the tenants that are there. I don't want to. That's really where it stands, and they're saying we're not giving them information. We don't have any new information. We've given them the information that we have. It's not what they want to hear, but there's nothing we can do about it. So that's really all I can say. Now, on the Genesis Equities hat I'll put on, we are quite a ways along with this process. And I think Hannah and Lydia is reaching out to each one of you, right, to go over it. Very complex, but it's something we're going to move forward. But in the last few days, we're vetting a way to bring the tenants forward sooner in this process rather than later.
What do you mean by forward?
Meaning in the beginning of the process that we'd be able to start negotiating with them. So that's complicated. I really can't say much more than that about it, but we're going to try to address so they have some certainty of, they have 3 questions. Can they get out of the lease? How much are they going to get for it? And when? That's their 3 questions. And it's really the same for us as a landlord. Same question. So there's carrying costs when all the tenants are gone that are quite substantial. So that has to be a piece with addressing these tenants sooner rather than later also. But we've been working on a comprehensive plan that I think would satisfy and be fair. But it's not really vetted yet, but that'll be presented to you, right? As part of this proposal, it'll be. So I would suggest that the tenants close ear the 17th. You guys are presenting the project. So
at the public meeting here, that's what you're referencing on the 17th.
Yeah. So any questions?
So are you anticipating between now and the 17th more meetings with the tenants?
No, there's nothing to share that they don't already know. They just don't. They're upset. I get that, but they're looking for a different answer than we can give them, and they constitute that as no communication. Well, That's not true. We can't change what the information they have until we make another step. And the next step is, do we have a project there? Otherwise, then that's the main thing. We have to have a project before we can start negotiating getting out of leases. That make sense? So,
Well, in order to put a timeline for that project, you also are going to have agreements with all of the tenants, so they know, so you're going to know
exactly. But I'm not
when
going,
they're going to
right
move
now
out.
I can't, true. But there'll be time because there's a lot of pieces to this, and I don't want to get into that now. There's things that have to happen
Okay.
before the project could be done. So they're going to have a decent amount of time, regardless of the agreement, to operate their business. And I would suggest that, that to ask the public. We've actually reached out to some news organizations when they splash this great news about what's happening in Marion. That harms the tenants when the rest of us gloat in all that wonderful news. There's people being harmed on the other side of that. It's just the way it is,
Well, I agree that negotiations should not be held in public.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we can't even have a negotiations without a project first because we don't. That's not possible. So we have to get another step, and it's just this project has changed a lot. We have taken a bigger role than we originally wanted to or did. So a different project really than it's a lot different than it did. But I believe through this time, the projects have gotten better and more exciting with each change.
So when you come back on the 17th, just so I understand the short piece of this timeline, you're going to give a presentation, and are you expecting us to make a move or take a vote that would give you information?
No, it's going to be a presentation we give to you, and I don't know when you would, I'm sure you're going to need time. I don't know how if you'll be forced to make a decision that night, I doubt it, or I have no idea.
It'll be a resolution for...
Yeah, can you come up and state your name?
What we're anticipating happening is that Genesis and Ryan have been working on making their formal project request to the city. Those get referred to the economic development team, then they get received and filed by the city council, and then the city council passes a resolution or a motion directing staff to begin developing a memorandum of understanding for any financial contribution to the project. That's what we would anticipate the council acting on the 17th, is to receive and file the formal request for the financial package, and then direct staff to take the next step to start really doing the deep dive into it so that we could eventually come back to the council with that project proposal.
And will that information, whatever council decides on the 17th, will that piece of information that you get allow you to then give more information to the tenants? Is that the piece you're waiting for?
The project has to have more certainty than just a receive and file. We'll have to have pretty good assurances before we kick the tenants out, basically. Before you're letting them off the hook for their lease, you got to make sure you have a viable project. So they'll at least have a better understanding that if it moves forward positively, that we will then be able to start negotiating with them.
We would hope that with this proposal, and we've reached out to everyone to hopefully meet next week and kind of go through some of these details so that you understand them a little bit better. And we've got some things we're trying to finish up this week to finalize that proposal. So some of those questions we don't have answers to yet today. But our plan is to have a timeline kind of attached to that, along with a mechanism that allows us to start with almost immediately upon city's approval of moving this project forward, that almost immediately allows us to start talking to those tenants and negotiating with them and making arrangements for the project start. So that's what our hope would be through the course of this proposal and through this council's consideration and approval of that project, hopefully. And that's just kind of a component of that proposal, so that we can address this, because we know that it is a concern, and it's a concern of ours as well, and we would like to move forward with some certainty on the project for everyone. So
okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you both. Lon, did you have anything else for that?
No.
Okay.
Unless there's any other questions.
I don't think so. Thank you. Okay, moving on to labor agreement.
Yes, Your Honor, this will be for a motion to approve resolution number 26760, approving a labor agreement with the International Association of Firefighter for the period of July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2021, as tabled on 4/3/2018.
Second.
Okay, motion by Randy, a second by Kim for the approval of labor agreement with the International Association of Firefighters. I believe, was it Holly that's going to?
Yeah, Holly Corkery with Lynch Dallas, who is our chief negotiator, is here. Are you going to come up? Yep. As she comes up, the proposal in front of the council is for a 3-year contract. The 2 other city bargaining units, police and AFSCME, are still under contract for the next 2 years. So this one has a year beyond what the other 2 bargaining units have under agreement right now.
Hi, I'm Holly Corkery from Lynch Dallas Law Firm, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. But I want to be clear from the outset that if I'm going to be giving you any legal advice about taking this agreement tonight or not taking it, we should move into exempt session under Chapter 20. Because if I would give you advice right now, it would break our privilege since we're in a public meeting. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Can you just point out the differences from the last contract?
Definitely.
At a high level.
What?
I don't mean to, at a high level, I don't mean that.
Yep, I won't go into all the nitty gritty. We deleted out dues deduction because that's illegal in all collective bargaining agreements in the state of Iowa now, so that's been taken out. We made some changes to hours and to education based on things that the chief wanted to have happen. We made some language changes under leave of absence that the fire department wanted to have happen to make things a little easier for them. We made a change to out of classification pay to make life easier for everyone, as I understand it. And then on the topics that are usually of concern to everyone, on wages, we ended it at a 2.85 over the course of the 3-year contract, and that is in line with our comparables, and it's in line with our past practice. And on insurance, we have switched to a % as opposed to a flat dollar amount. So we did a concept change in how they pay premiums. So the fire department will be paying a percentage of the premium now rather than paying a flat dollar amount. And the out-of-pocket maximum was increased in year 3. So that was the insurance change. And we also put some language in there for the wellness program. I know as a Blue Zone city, that's really important to Marion to continue that on. If you look towards the end of the agreement, there's some letters of agreement or memorandums of understanding. And just to give you some high level of those, they're either continuing on memorandums that we've already had and continue to do in the past, or, for example, the Labor Management Committee, that's a new thing for the Marion Fire Department, and that'll give management and labor an opportunity to sit down and talk on a regular basis about what's going right and what's going wrong and things we might be able to do in between negotiations to fix some things if need be.
Excellent. Anyone have any questions?
I appreciate getting it so we could look at it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Holly, thanks.
Yes,
Thanks
you're
for
welcome.
all your work on it as well.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded for 26,760. I need to put my glasses on, sorry. 26,760 for the labor agreement with the International Association of Firefighters. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Resolution passes.
Your Honor, I have ordinance number 1804, amending the Chapter 120-0511 of the Code of Ordinances for prohibited sales and acts relating to the presence of persons under the legal age, and this is the initial consideration.
Second.
Okay, motion by Paul and a second by Will. We spoke about this one pretty specifically on Tuesday, but Ryan, perhaps you'll just give a highlight of what brought this to our attention and kind of why we're looking at this in isolation outside of the larger ordinance.
Thank you. Yes, so the background on this essentially is we've got some establishments here in town that would like the ability to have special endorsements to allow minors to come into bars for special occasions. We have some events coming up, graduations, things of that nature, and as that provision of 120 of the Marion Code is currently written, they cannot do that without special permission. One thing that I would maybe like to clarify a little better as I thought about my comments Tuesday night, our amendment here to 120.05 subparagraph 11 isn't creating any new rights or new abilities. As that code section currently stands, they have the right to apply for these special permits, these special event permits. The problem is, as it's currently written, there's no mechanism by which they apply for these. And so 120.05 subparagraph 11 clarifies that a little bit, and then I would actually like to thank, in particular, Leanne from Finance, that she's spent a great deal of time and energy working on helping to put together what these permits would look like. So we have a proposed permit form I'd like to show you. If you look this is the permit then that the person making the application, they would fill out sections 1 and 2. That'd be their information. And 2 would be the specifications of what this is. And it's the same permit whether it's a special event endorsement or an ongoing endorsement. I think there was less concern when we discussed this on Tuesday night about the special event endorsement as there was about the ongoing endorsement, about this idea that they could just apply and it'd be a carte blanche to come in and do that. Now, if you look, it's intended that they would specify on the ongoing what days of the week that they would like this to include and the hours of those days that they would like included and why it is that they want that permit, the purpose. Now, in theory, they could make this a very open-ended application, but I'm assuming that the more broad of an application that they're making, the less likely the council is to approve it. That's certainly going to be your prerogative whether to vote it up or down. But you will have guidance in this as well. One of the things that that current section of the code requires is that the chief of police actually give formal approval to it. This would remove that. It would also remove the necessity for the council to make an actual formal resolution to pass it. It'd bring it more in conformity with anybody else making these applications for any type of alcohol permit. It does, however, include the input of the chief of police and others. I just want to show you briefly the bottom. Here's where the mayor would actually sign approval of it. But there is a second page to this endorsement where it has the police department to review it and indicate any conditions or comments they have, as well as the planning department and the clerk's office. So any of those departments, first of all, could sign off on it or not sign off on it. Now, if they didn't sign off on it, that's not to say you couldn't vote on it, but I would certainly raise some questions as to why they would refuse to sign off on it. But it would also give you some guidance as to why that particular department had any issues with it or additional comments or concerns, conditions they would want to see put in place. And part of the permit process then is that the applicant would need to abide by those additional restrictions that would be placed on them. So This provision of the code it's not, I guess I left here Tuesday night thinking that maybe you were concerned that the open-end application or the ongoing endorsement was a little too loose and open-ended, and it really isn't. The burden is going to be on the applicant to tailor it as narrowly as they would like it to be, but again, if they make it too broad, that could come back to bite them. So that's essentially what I have to say in addition to what we discussed on Tuesday night. Are there any other questions you have on this particular change?
Well, just in general, is this the chapter that you've had discussions about or comments that is going to be looked at in detail as far as getting it updated?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, to give you a little bit of a preview of what we're looking at as we revamp the entire 120, it's not going to be massive sweeping changes. It's going to be primarily tidying things up that are in conflict with each other, getting rid of some of the archaic and anachronistic laws that really haven't been an issue or haven't been enforced for the last 50 plus years, things like that. But this is a part of it. This is just part of sort of the stopgap until we get the whole code section revamped.
Paul?
Thank you.
All right.
Much better explanation than we had on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah, I'm happy this still goes through the scrutiny of staff, and so I think that it's a good move.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so ordinance 18-04 to amend chapter 120.05 of the Code of Ordinances has a first, or a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, motion passes.
Your Honor, I make a motion to suspend the rules and place ordinance number 18-04 on the agenda for adoption and adopt.
Second?
Motion by Kim and a second by Paul to suspend the rules, and this would basically fast track what we just discussed and waive all the readings. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would essentially go from initial consideration directly to the third consideration. It would require a roll call vote and approval by 75% of the entire council. And since we are missing Mr. Abu Asali, there's your margin right there.
Okay.
You essentially need to be a unanimous vote.
And this is, okay, so if it passes, this is adopted tonight, and if it fails, it comes back for a second reading, and we could at that time opt to waive a third reading?
Yes.
Well, just to be clear, yes, if it's my understanding you are moving immediately to third consideration, or essentially suspending the rules, skipping the second consideration, going to third. If that measure fails, the initial consideration has taken place, you come back for the second consideration. You could, at the second consideration, once again, move to suspend the rules and go immediately to third.
Okay, thank
But it
you.
would still follow the same procedural aspects of needing a roll call and 75%.
Understood. And so just to be clear, I will be voting no because I want the public to be able to have an opportunity to digest this before we read it a second time, and at that time I would probably waive it because I do think it is a good change. I just don't want to fast track something without letting it be out there for a while. So that's my explanation, but we'll take a roll call vote, please.
I agree with you there on that one.
Yeah, okay. Good.
Ms. Etzel?
No.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Ms. Gedalia?
No.
Mr. Brandt?
No.
Mr. Sternad?
Yes.
Mr. Draper?
Yes.
Okay, motion fails, and we'll see this in a couple of weeks for a second reading then. Okay, excellent.
All right, next I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 18-05, amending chapter 120.06, subparagraph 2 of the Code of Ordinances relating to the locations where alcohol is sold for consumption on premises, and this is the initial consideration.
Second.
Motion by Steve and a second by Paul for another amendment to 120.06 Code of Ordinances. Ryan, would you give us a little background on this, please?
Thank you. Yes, this is essentially, it came about when St. Joe's applied to reinstate fun days and be able to sell alcohol. The provision under the Marion Code, this time still under Chapter 120, but .06, there's a prohibition against issuing licenses to sell alcohol within a 200-foot zone around the property of any school or religious institution. And here we have kind of the unusual circumstance where it's actually the religious institution that's asking for the permit. What this would do, it doesn't single out just St. Joe's and just permit St. Joe's. This would allow any nonprofit organization to again apply for a special permit that would give them, for the purposes of that event, an exception to the religious, not just the religious institution, but the school prohibition as well.
Okay. Any questions for Ryan? Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Steve, a second by Paul for Ordinance 1805 to amend Chapter 120.06 of the Code of Ordinances. Beth, can we do a roll call vote for this one, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Ms. Gedalia?
No.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Sternad?
I have to abstain from this one.
Mr. Draper?
Yes.
And Ms. Setzel?
Yes.
Did this one require a supermajority?
You did not request to suspend the rules, correct? This is just the initial consideration?
Yes.
No.
All right, it's just the initial.
So did this pass? I wasn't keeping tally with 6. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
4 yes votes on this.
Thank you. Okay, motion passes, and we'll see this again for second reading at the next public hearing. Okay, moving on to item number 6.
Yes, Your Honor, this will be for the mayoral appointment for Rachel Schramm at 5640 Prairie Hill Court, Planning and Zoning Commission. Term expires on 12/31/2022.
Second?
We have a motion by Randy and a second by Will to appoint a new member, Rachel Schramm, to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm glad to see, are we full now? One more, okay. Building it up. Terrific. It's a very important commission with all of the growth and everything going on in Marion, so glad to see another spot get filled. All those in favor of this mayoral appointment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. If Rachel is here, congratulations. At this time, we would recognize any citizen presentations, comments, or petitions regarding anything on the agenda, or I think anything in general. You'd please come to the lectern, state your name and address. Now is your opportunity. Okay. Seeing none, council discussion time. Will? Anything?
No.
Okay. Randy?
Yes, there was obviously a press release that came out today. I wanted to congratulate Mike and your department. Marion was named today and given the honor of the 2017 Tree City USA Growth Award at the 28th Annual Community Forestry Awards Luncheon in Des Moines today. So kudos to you and your staff, and another great award for Marion. So that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, Steve? Nothing on March Madness, really? There's no...
I'm sorry. The reason I really love March Madness is 2 reasons. One, I just love college basketball. Second of all, the championship game was not very exciting. But two, when March Madness is over, it also means you move into golf season and spring activities, and that is not there. So it's not quite as exciting as it normally is. So I'm still waiting for the spring.
Maybe in 2 weeks there'll be some more news. Kim? Okay.
Oh, yes. First of all, Caldwell Banker had the ribbon cutting last evening, which I'm sorry to say I missed, but the building really looks nice when you consider that was our first brick building in Marion, and made from bricks made in Marion, by the way, of which we're going to talk about. And most of you know that I enjoy history. Well, I've been comparing a few things, and I wondered about Iowa itself. In the state of Iowa, at one time was the eastern Iowa was the western associated with Wisconsin. So eastern Iowa was part of the Wisconsin territory and that was 1837 until 1838, late. And I found it interesting, Lynn County was named after Lewis F. Lynn, who was a senator from Missouri. I've kind of always wondered how that occurred, and that's where it came from. Then I began to wonder what else was happening in the world in 1837. And as we get into later years, you can count on me to bore you further, but 1837, there wasn't a whole lot going on in the United States. There was a general election. The patent for the first electronic printing press, 1837, when you think about that. Martin Van Buren was elected to his second term as president. And it's interesting, the little city in Illinois in 1837 was granted a charter by Illinois. That little city was Chicago. Now, they were formed about the same time we were. They may have grown a little bit more, I don't know, but we're a lot safer than they are, Chief. Thank you. The territory of Iowa then came about in 1838. Lynn County had their first election then. We had townships, and we had a supervisor from each of those townships. Now we're having a supervisor's election and reducing from 5 to 3 when there was a period of time when we had 18. So that's changed a bit. The other things that occurred, the Marion carries the date of 1839. The first tavern was founded in Marion in a log cabin, actually out on Central Avenue, and the first retail operation was also brought about in 1839. The first store in Marion was at 11th Street and 10th Avenue in a log cabin. 11th Street and 10th Avenue. I think the interesting thing in the world at that point in the United States was William Harrison had been elected president, and he served from the time he was elected on 2/18/1841 until 4/4/1841 when he died of pneumonia, and he was the shortest term president in the United States. 1842 brought about the Oregon Trail, which the first group of travelers was 100, and at one point there were over 1,000 wagon trains on the Oregon Trail going through here to the west as they prepared in 1849, which we'll talk about later in the gold rush days. So Marion's developed along with the rest of the Midwest and the rest of the United States, and it's interesting to see the parallels of what's happened here.
Thanks, Paul. I had two things, both related to information seeking. So the first, I mentioned Tuesday, I'd like to make a formal request of staff to put together, whether it's on an evening or a Saturday, kind of a, I don't know if it's a strategic plan, but just an overview of the master plan, the Indian Creek, the neighborhood at Indian Creek plan, the central corridor. We have a lot of things shaping up, and I think for the benefit of new members to council and planning and zoning, if they're invited, and whomever else would make sense, I think it'd be great to all be in the room and talk about the vision and kind of get any questions answered that we have. I don't know if it makes sense to stick this into that because it is hard to get everyone together, but talk about housing stock as well in terms of how that's dispersed around the areas. Again, I don't know if that makes sense, but that is a conversation I think we need to have sooner rather than later, given that the agenda had a few separate items about spot zoning changes, and so I'd like to try to get ahead of that. The other request I have is to ask for, to put as a discussion item, if there's room on the 17th, but very soon, for the pay for performance policy, mostly to just understand it. We've been doing evaluations lately, and again, for the benefit of new people, to understand what the process is, how it works, and just ironing out any wrinkles before things are too established and we go another year without doing that. So I think with the reorg and all of the upheaval of things, this is another thing it'd be good to tie up and have a good understanding for. And with that, I thank everyone for coming tonight and your interest in Marion, and have a good evening meeting. Oh, Lon? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I know many of the council members were there, but with the unveiling of the Future 4, I think one of the things that I just wanted to show some public appreciation for was the work and effort that the selection committee put on in the background of that. That was a very, very large task, and they all volunteered their time. I believe we have at least 2 of the members in attendance at the meeting tonight, and just wanted to publicly thank them for their input in helping shape the future of the community.
Excellent. And those are what the renderings are out in the hallway for anyone to see. Thank you for pointing that out, and have a great evening, everyone. Meeting adjourned.